Welcome back to the Economist New York East Med Summit. We're moving on now to our third panel, which is very much going to focus on investment opportunities for corporations and investors following COVID-19. And we'll be no doubt picking up on some of the themes that we've heard already in previous panels. So let me introduce our speakers one by one. We've got 5 speakers for this panel. The first is Konstantinos Petridis, the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Cyprus. Nikos Papathanasis, Alternate Minister of Development and Investment of Greece. Georgios Filiopoulos, the CEO of Enterprise Greece, who I believe will join by telephone connection. Dominik Volek, member of the Executive Committee of Henley and Partners, and Itai Green, founder and CEO of Innovate Israel. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And without further ado, we're going to get started. So let me first of all introduce Konstantinos Petridis, Minister of Finance of the Republic of Cyprus. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank The Economist for organizing the New York East Med Summit and for providing me an opportunity to briefly present the Cyprus economy outlook, but also the opportunities that might arise for corporations and investors following the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, with no doubt, the COVID-19 pandemic has posed an unexpected challenges for all countries around the globe, definitely with severe socioeconomic consequences. Now, from the onset of the crisis, for us in Cyprus, maintaining positive epidemiological conditions was at the cornerstone of our policy. Of our policy response, and that's why it took really strict measures, health measures, in order to contain the spread of the virus. And I believe that we have succeeded in that respect to a great degree. And actually, that was a conscious economic policy decision from the beginning, because it was also, besides the health effects of such a strict policies, for us it was a way to mitigate the medium-term and the long-term economic effects of the pandemic. Now, in the economic front, in the pure economic front, we responded with early and front-loaded economic measures to address the effect of the pandemic, and we have adopted a very generous fiscal stimulus package, mainly based on short-term income support, but also on liquidity measures for the enterprises. And I do believe that we have adopted one of the most comprehensive packages at European Union level, consisting of 85 different measures. I think that we have succeeded in our policy response, and this success is already reflected in the indicators. And now, from the floor of The Economist, I'm in a position to officially announce also the official downward revision of our forecast for 2020, from a contraction of the GDP of 7%, which was the baseline scenario until now, to a contraction of minus 5.5% for this year. And of course, this is of particular importance, considering in mind that one of the big sectors of the Cypriot economy is the tourist sector, which goes according to the worst scenario. We have a decrease of about 80% in the arrivals, but still, I think our policy response has maintained Cyprus to a satisfactory level of activity. And this is also reflected in our forecast for the unemployment. And we are in a position to revise it downwards from 9% for 2020 to 8%. Despite this, our baseline macroeconomic scenario for 2021, and despite the uncertainty that is still out there, we expect a significant rebound of the economy of about 4.5 to 5% for next year. So we see that the policies are working. The early, timely, and front-loaded measures are working. The consumer indicators are good. Of course, we have to turn our eye now to the next day, and there are indeed no magical solutions for either growth or the recovery. Now, our broader strategy for economic recovery includes definitely the implementation of much needed structural reforms for the development of key sectors of the economy, fully exploiting the new tools that the European Union offers, for example, the Recovery and Resilience Fund. This instrument is forward-looking and will provide a mix of grants and loans to member states, which are expected to be instrumental in the revamping of the resilience of our economy. We do plan to have a bold reform package to green the economy, to digitalize the economy even further. Of course, we always know that attracting investments, foreign investments, it's always important. It's even more important during this time of uncertainty because of the pandemic. Of course, we have to attract investments because of our own merits. So we have to have a competitive economy. A competitive economy is indeed a catalyst for attracting corporations and investors that are looking for investment destinations which can provide high returns on their investments. Foreign investments are more important as ever in this era of uncertainty. So I would say that the solution lies within economic orthodoxy, and is based on three main pillars. The first main pillar is to maintain macroeconomic stability. Maintain macroeconomic stability means also to maintain sound fiscal policies. And if we responded timely and effectively to this crisis, is because in the past 7-8 years, we have created the necessary fiscal space. We had a balanced budget, or a budget with a surplus, which allowed us to intervene timely in the time of crisis. Now, the second pillar, of course, is to continue the effort to decrease the burden of the NPLs in the economy. We made important and significant progress over the past years in that respect. But after the COVID, we have to give a new impetus to this effort. And the third pillar, which I would say it's the most relevant pillar, and it's the pillar that the EU wants to promote with its new policy, is to proceed with structural reforms that would enhance a favorable for Cyprus investment framework. And I must say that we already have underway a very bold reform effort. We have, from the government side, we have concluded a number of reform packages and bills that they are already submitted to the Parliament, to the House. For example, a new investment law to facilitate a fast track for substantial and real investments, a bold public administration reform, a bold local authority reform, which consists of the decrease of the municipal authorities, a judiciary reform, and all of this will, I believe, they would add on to the attractiveness of our economy over and above of the existing significant comparative advantages that Cyprus possesses as an investment destination. For example, I shouldn't repeat that in Cyprus we already have a transparent and modern legal system based on the UK common law. We have a highly trained workforce and professional services and a network of lawyers, accountants, and corporate service providers. we have favorable and transparent tax regime and an extensive network of double tax agreements. And we have an excellent telecommunications, transport, and logistic infrastructure. On top of that, of course, Cyprus is an EU member state at a very strategic geographical location at the crossroad of three continents, which I believe is ideal for expansion in new markets. So concluding, I would say that we do have the comparative advantages. We are proceeding with structural reforms in order to enhance the areas that we are lagging behind and filling the gaps. I wouldn't target on specific investments because I think that Cyprus offers horizontal investment opportunities for all investors, and we have seen real investments coming into the economy over the past 7 or 8 years in the fields of renewable energy or energy sector, in the fields of university sector, in the forms of tourism, the tourism sector, and differentiated tourism products have been created because of foreign direct investment. So I would say that building on the traditional pillars of economic growth and economic recovery would strengthen Cyprus' effort in order to attract new investments, foreign direct investments, in our effort to build an even more sustainable economic growth model in the future. So I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Minister. That was really clear and very useful, and good to hear about your forecast revisions for GDP and unemployment for this year, and your forecast for 2021. But we'll come back to you in a while with some more questions. So let me introduce our next speaker, Nikos Papathanasis, the alternate Minister of Development and Investment. Over to you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Hoy. Distinguished guests, Your Excellency, Minister of Finance, ladies and gentlemen, that you are watching this event. It's a great opportunity for us to discuss in this event the opportunities for corporations and investors following this pandemic. And it is very crucial to discuss what kind of world we'll be facing after the pandemic, since this is an event that our recent history has not met. And during our times, it's probably one of the most serious events that this generation has faced. Of course, the pandemic does not only affect the public health. This is something that all the communities, all the countries all over the world are trying to face with the best way they can. But also it affects severely, I would say, the national economies. In that sense, the Greek government has responded with several packages of measures since March in order to face the crisis, and to set up a roadmap that will set the basis in order to reset the economy and basically to protect employment. So from the time of reopening our economy, we acted very proactively, and this happened quite early, since we had a very successful lockdown. We succeeded in subsiding all the incidents, and we opened the economy with proactive measures in order to provide both businesses and workers with the necessary fiscal support, of course, within our fiscal capacity. They need to get through this difficult period. Well, the global health crisis, of course, did not stop us from implementing our reforms, and this government is a reformist government. we made radical interventions even while being in the middle of the pandemic. We are continuing with judicial reforms. We are continuing with digitizing all our procedures in a very fast pace. We are significantly reinforcing the digital footprint of the state, and this is of course, due to the COVID-19 situation. All reforms in that matter that we had planned in doing within the first 2 years of the government, we ended up, of course, doing it within this short period. We continue on working on our new spatial planning bill in order to organize our public spaces, in order to make the investors' environment much more clean and ready for investments. We are specifying land use. This is something that we had stayed well behind, and all the out of plan and unregulated building activity is being finally restricted. We continue in reducing all steps required in order to start the operation of an enterprise, and we are making things much easier and faster in licensing procedures in order to speed up all the investments in whatever field, and especially in the renewable energy sources. We have announced the measure of 200% over depreciation for digital and green fixed capital investments for 3 years from 2021 to 2023. Now, this is a very significant direct injection of liquidity that reduces corporate tax and incentivizes investment in equipment that improves overall productivity. It digitizes processes and principally reduces the environmental footprint of business. But now we are ahead in managing the RRF fund. We are now in the process of preparing our proposal. And finally, we will end up having to manage 72 billion euro from in total funds within a short period of time. The overall package will be used to support employment and to accelerate the exit from the deep recession caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. We are currently working hard on our national growth plan that includes both reforms and investments. We have said right from the beginning that we would like to make Greece a friendly country for investment, and we are continuously working on that issue. Special emphasis, of course, will be placed on important initiatives to tackle climate change, green transition, and digital modernization. The funds will be starting in 2021 after the conclusion of the discussions. And at that time, of course, we will initiate all the transformation of our economy. We have a stable, reform-oriented government that wants to upgrade Greece's competitive positions, that have placed attractive foreign investors as a #1 priority. We want to attract foreign direct investments that will establish Greece as a central investment hub in the wider region of the southeastern Mediterranean. 2019 was a successful year in attractive foreign direct investment, but still we are lacking from the average attraction percentage of the European Union. We are working on it, trying to initiate more incentives. Greece stands on the crossroad of 3 continents, and this establishes our country as a strategic player in the greater region. On January, Greece, Israel, and Cyprus signed the EastMed gas pipeline agreement for the transport of natural gas from the Eastern Mediterranean to supply European markets. Our aim is to reach a final investment decision by 2022 and have the pipeline completed by 2025 to help Europe diversify its energy resources. Greece is a pillar of stability in a strategically complicated region and a country which is poised to become a maritime superpower. We recently welcomed the delegation from the US International Development Finance Corporation. We had discussions of how to advance strategic investments, and we continue with to receive quite high interest from other many European and US companies, as well companies from Israel. We would like to reactivate the defense industry of Greece, so we are now in the process of finalizing the rebirth of the LFC shipyards. I would like to point out that Neorion Siru is now working in full capacity. So we are reactivating LFC shipyards with a new investment plan, and this is where the DFC is planning to invest. We are proceeding with the tender of Skaramagas shipyards. There's high interest for Skaramagas shipyards, so completing LFCs and Skaramagas shipyards, along with Neorion Siru, we will have 3 powerful shipyards operating, changing completely the map of this industry. We are completing the procedures of the tender for the Hellenic vehicle industry. There's a very strong Israeli-American company having placed a sound offer, and it's finalizing. And of course, we are reorganizing and we are transforming our Hellenic aerospace industry in order to acquire more capacity. Well, in the next 3 years, Greece will continue to be an investment-friendly country full of business opportunities. We welcome all the investors to participate and take advantage of these prospects. And of course, we are working hard in order to complete our reforms and making our country a desirable location for investment. Thank you very much, Mrs. Hoy.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Papathanasis, for that very detailed overview. Very useful indeed. So now we're going to go now by telephone connection. I'd like to introduce the next speaker, Georgios Philiopoulos, who is the CEO of Enterprise Greece. I hope that you can join us now and hear us. And I'm going to hand over to you to make your introductory remarks. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation to join today's panel and to be amongst such distinguished speakers. And I have to apologize, but technology has been an ally in these times. At this time, though, it has failed us here with the connection. There is no doubt that we live in very unusual times, and the pandemic has crippled the global economy. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development has predicted that FDI globally could drop by 40% this year. However, despite the challenges and the overall uncertainty that is troubling us on both personal and business levels, the key thing to remember here is that the current situation is temporary, and the world economy in general, and the Greek economy in particular, will come out stronger and continue to grow. Greece has generally been lauded for its handling of the COVID crisis, and that has reinforced the country's image as a safe place to invest. In dealing with the immediate economic impact of the crisis, the Greek government, as Minister Papathanasis said, has put in place a package of support measures for businesses and households. These include tax relief, direct subsidies, financing for companies, and are designed to safeguard jobs and boost short-term liquidity until the economy can recover. The crisis also served as a catalyst for the government's overall digital strategy. Our country has rolled out a new platform that offers hundreds of government services online and has implemented a program to upgrade IT skills in the private sector. This digital leap forward will have far-reaching and positive effects on productivity and competitiveness. So, even amid the current global uncertainty, Greece has become a promising and secure investment destination in Southeast Europe. Actually, here in Enterprise Greece, we continue to see strong investor interest in sectors like tourism and real estate, energy, logistics, technology, in the agri-food sector, and of course in healthcare and life sciences. What's more, following the years of economic crisis, the asset prices in Greece are still undervalued. Let me here cite data from one recent study by a leading international consulting firm. According to the survey, more than 70% of investors have a positive or very positive view of Greece's overall response, the support measures, and the rollout of the e-government services. Our agency, Enterprise Greece, reinforces this positive perception of Greece via a set of integrated services, such as preparation of customized investment proposals, information on available funding tools and incentives, matchmaking services for potential investors and project owners, fast track of strategic investment projects, and an active project portfolio from competitive business and industry sectors like tourism, real estate, energy, and many more. We promote these projects free of charge and under strict confidentiality for the investors. And let me conclude here with a quote by Winston Churchill that I think applies to the current situation and highlights our attitude here in Greece towards the pandemic. The pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity. The optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. We are optimists, and we invite you to join us and to explore together Greece's rewarding investment opportunities. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I hope you're going to stay on the line now. And just in case you aren't able to stay for the whole discussion, I think I'll take the opportunity now to just follow up with a couple of questions before we move on to our next speakers. Is that okay with you?
Sure, that's fine.
Great. Thanks very much. Yeah, I don't know if you were able to join the earlier panels, but you did have somebody, Mr. Stewart, from the US singing the praises of Enterprise Greece, actually, and the job that's you've been doing over the past year or so. So I guess I've got a couple of questions. One is, what about the geopolitics and the whole increase in tensions in the Eastern Med? Has that had an impact on investors, existing investors or potential new investors? Is that something that you've encountered in your work? Has it had an impact, or do you expect it to have an impact or not? Because in general, as you've emphasized and other speakers have emphasized, there's been a very positive reaction to the election of the new government and what it's managed to achieve so far, and particularly in the 5 months before COVID hit, and then its management of the pandemic. So that's been all to the good in terms of perceptions of political stability and competent management and all the rest of it. But what about this now? Do you think this could have a negative impact for investors?
Speaking from the experience of our organization, we haven't seen a big concern about this because the Greek government has established strong alliances. Greece participates, is a member of powerful organizations like the NATO and the EU. And in the past year or so, it has established a network of alliances in the region. So we haven't seen so far a significant drawback in terms of investors' expectations. We hope that the situation will keep normalizing as it has started a couple of weeks ago with the new initiatives by the European Union and with the support of the European Union and the US government. And we have a cautiously optimistic outlook because, as you know, it takes two to tango. So I think that we hope that things will get back to normal relatively soon.
Great, thank you. Just one other quick question then on FDI. I mean, you mentioned the UNCTAD forecast for this year, which was for a decline in global FDI flows of 40%. And as we all know, up to now, historically, direct investment into Greece has still been rather disappointing and paltry. So have you noticed then a significant change over the past year? And looking ahead, taking into account what the government has done already and the concrete measures which Mr. Papathanasis has listed, many of them, the measures that are have been implemented or are in process. What do you think should be the priorities for the government there? What do you think would really be a game changer in terms of attracting much larger foreign direct investment inflows to Greece?
Let me say here that in Enterprise Greece, we haven't seen a cancellation of a single project all this time of the pandemic. The projects that we have been handling keep moving forward without any major interruptions. And in the meantime, we have projects worth close to 7 billion in the grapevine. So we keep seeing significant interest by investors. What, of course, we cannot measure is the additional growth that we might have experienced had the pandemic not happened. So I think that we are on the right track, and I think that the positive image that Greece has gained from the way that it has dealt with the pandemic will help in the post-COVID era. And as I mentioned, this is something temporary. As soon as we've got some kind of effective vaccine or some potent treatment of the COVID virus, things will get back to normal, and I do believe that we will see a strong rebound.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you very much for those comments. I'm not sure if you'll be able to continue joining us on the discussion, but we really appreciate your input so far. So let me introduce our next speaker, Dominik Volek, member of the Executive Committee of Henley & Partners. Over to you.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be on such an esteemed panel and for the opportunity to comment on the opportunities for investors following COVID-19. I will particularly focus on Greece's highly successful residence by investment program, as well as Cyprus's post-COVID-19 opportunity with regard to both its residence and citizenship programs. I'm sure most of you attending the summit are already somewhat familiar with these programs offered by both countries. Investment migration programs are not a new phenomenon. In fact, ancient Athenians pioneered the practice of granting citizenship in return for exceptional economic contributions to the state. Fast forward roughly 2 millennia, and since the turn of the century, the number of investment migration programs has grown rapidly as more nations realize their value in the escalating competition for global capital, talent, and wealth. Investment migration programs encourage affluent families to relocate and to contribute to the local economy through both entrepreneurial and consumer activity. What is more, successful applicants bring less tangible resources such as unique skill sets, valuable commercial knowledge, as well as rich global networks. Contrary to popular belief, residence and citizenship programs are not the exclusive domain of nations that are struggling economically. 19 of the G20 nations, including the UK and the US, offer mechanisms to attract foreign direct investment in exchange for residence rights. And in the last 10 years, the European Union has welcomed more than 6,000 new citizens and over 100,000 new residents through such programs, along with around 25 billion euros in foreign direct investment. Cyprus is, of course, one of the top performers, generating on average 976 million euros annually. Greece has also been reaping sizable investments averaging 250 million euros annually. Stimulating economic activity is certainly a non-negotiable for any sovereign in the current context, and there are many direct economic benefits that nations with investment migration programs typically experience. And in both countries' cases, these include significant growth in the real estate sector and construction industry, growth in the number and size of local businesses, increased liquidity in the commercial banking system, overall employment growth, both in terms of direct and indirect job creation, and of course a rise in tourism, increased hotel room supply, as well as air traffic. To encapsulate, these benefits tend to be cumulative and lead to other positives such as increased tax revenues, infrastructure development, better fiscal performance, and less dependence on debt and international aid. At Henley & Partners, we refer to this dynamic as sovereign equity, sophisticated global investors diversifying their global investment portfolios by buying into the sovereign state to gain a long-term yield of enhanced mobility. Sovereign equity generating investment migration programs create significant value by delivering a source of sustainable liquidity that provides both monetary and fiscal economy, as it is an equity injection, not increased leverage. And it can be used to drive economic growth and core infrastructure, enhancing the lives of all citizens. Greece's successful residence program has now raised over 2.2 billion euros in investments since its inception in 2013. The Golden Visa program had a record-breaking year last year in 2019, with approximately 1 billion euros in total investment, making it the best-performing European residence program. This represents significant growth over previous years and attests to the quality and desirability of Greece as a residence, as well as to the success of the program's implementation. On the other hand, Cyprus's citizenship program is already one of Europe's top performers and is one of the ways in which Cyprus itself turned its economy around following the 2012-2013 banking crisis. As the program has gained momentum with increased awareness, so has the country's GDP, which has shown steady growth trajectory since 2017. In July, a bill of amendments was passed in Cyprus aimed at safeguarding, improving, and making the Cyprus investment program even more attractive. These changes included a revised donation amount, acceleration of processing time for applicants' family members, and the inclusion of a new category of extended family members. Governments expect to benefit when they set up these investment migration programs, and the programs provide invaluable economic security to their host countries. As we now enter the worst recession since the Great Depression, countries with operational programs are better equipped to weather the storm, as they provide a source of debt-free foreign capital to buffer the impact of the pandemic. Going forward, nations without such investment migration programs will find themselves increasingly handicapped in the global competition for both investment and talent. Cyprus and Greece have a head start, and their established and successful programs already in place, and with various options available to both countries to scale up and extend the impact of their programs, investment migration certainly presents a sea of opportunities for both Mediterranean countries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Follett. Let me just ask you one question now. We're going to open up after all the speakers have spoken for discussion, but just to pick up on what you call sovereign equity and the role that it can play, the particular role that it can play now in the post-COVID situation. For countries, especially countries such as Greece and Cyprus, which are highly dependent on tourism, which is practically non-existent now, which also two countries which have very high levels of government debt. So how can sovereign equity really compensate, do you think, or how can it boost the economy?
Sure. So the opposite of sovereign equity is sovereign debt. So essentially a central government's debt. It is debt that's issued by the national government in a foreign currency to finance the issuing country's growth and development. If a country is not financially robust to begin with, then of course it risks defaulting on its loans, which allows global financial institutions to take the helm and inform sovereign policy decisions. Many sovereign states around the globe lack the ability to raise significant funds, and short of discovering a hitherto unknown natural resource, the capacity to alleviate their debts is seriously limited. Sovereign equity, on the other hand, is the idea that instead of selling debt to finance their spending, countries are selling their equity. So sovereign equity can endow nations with a considerable source of sustainable revenue without them having to further increase debt. This capacity to raise the equity of sovereign states or to provide sovereign equity is a phenomenon uniquely facilitated by investment migration. Investment migration is proven to be an effective means of addressing this dilemma and is relatively untapped. As a direct injection of liquidity into a country's economy, it relieves stress on the national treasury without tying the country into debt-based obligations. And Greece is just one such example that recognizes the value of sovereign equity, seeing as that it introduced its Golden Visa program in 2013 in an effort to attract foreign investment to contribute to the long-term and sustainable growth of the Greek economy. And as I said earlier, the success of the program has increased significantly in recent years and has now brought in an estimated 2.2 billion in foreign direct capital into the Greek economy.
Thank you. It's a very interesting proposition. I think we can follow up on some of that in the discussion afterwards. But let me now turn to the final speaker on this panel and introduce Itai Green, who's the founder and CEO of Innovate Israel. Over to you.
Hi, Shalom from Israel. So with your permission, I would like to use a few slides. So I'm going to speak about corporate open innovation, which is a huge opportunity following the COVID-19 crisis. During the crisis, we could find two types of employees, those that were at home watching Netflix and the other one that were working from day to night via Zoom, really trying to innovate even during the crisis. The best thing for innovation is really the COVID-19. I mean, there's some positive aspect in the coronavirus, and the innovation is really something that is growing during this time. In the next slide, you can see a quote that tells something that I think most of us agree upon, is that there is an arrogance of success of big corporations and also governments that tend to think that what used to work for them in the past is going to be enough in the future. And during the COVID-19, it is clear for, I think, everyone that what used to be enough is not enough anymore. And during the crisis, we could see that corporations and governments that were more tech-oriented were more flexible to handle the crisis. So the more techy you are, the more flexible you are to deal with unexpected crises like the COVID-19. Another thing is that everyone is now looking into efficiency, maximizing efficiency. And it is another thing that the only way, I think, almost the only way to deal with is with technology. So technology is absolutely a good thing to rely on when we are trying to recover. In the next slide, there is a quote that actually is the core idea of open innovation. It's no matter who you are, even if you are Facebook or Google, most of the smartest people work for someone else. It's a matter of statistics. And I hope you agree with that. And it means that following the COVID-19, in order to stay relevant, we have to collaborate. We have to partner. We have to partner with those smart people, with those third parties. It might be other companies, other governments, other academy professionals, and also startups, which is an area where Israel is very strong at. The open innovation methodology is the lowest risk with the greatest ROI in order to stay relevant. And in the next slide, you can see I was publishing recently an article sharing 10 tips for corporate open innovation with startup companies. In the next slide, if you can move to the next one. Yes. So with your permission, I would like to focus today only on the first tip, and the other 9 you are more than welcome to read by yourself. So the first tip is the commitment. It is a commitment of the board. It is a commitment, as you can see in the next slide, it is a commitment of the board. It is a commitment of the C-level. It is a commitment of the government or of the parliament. It is super important to have this commitment for open innovation. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. And in the next slide, you can see that board members in many of the boards that we are familiar with are not really familiar with open innovation, the value of that, what's in it for us, what value it's going to provide for the company or for the government. And one of the things that everyone needs to concentrate on is to make these board members be much more familiar with open innovation, because and when they don't know, it's a problem. And the more they know, the more they will know about open innovation, the better performance we're going to see in the companies. And diversity is the key. Diversity in the board, diversity in the C-level. We all know that it is super important to have women in boards, but it is also important to have other people rather than people who are specialized in finance and economy and business. We need to have in boards also people who are professional in innovation and technology. In the next slide, you'll see that in Israel, it is mandatory by law that in each and every bank, there is going to be at least one board member who is professional in innovation and technology. Also, by the way, Instagram CEO joined Walmart board for the same reason, because of diversity importance. And in the next slide, you'll see that it's not my theory, it is based on MIT research. They found that when you have 3 board members who are specialized with technology and innovation, the bottom line, the business bottom line of the company is going to be better than its competitors. And this is a simple, minor change which any government can implement in a day or in a week, and the impact is huge. So I highly recommend, and we have here great people, senior people from the government of Greece and Cyprus. I think this change, which is little, huge impact, and I highly recommend to do it, because this will help the companies to adopt innovation faster and stay relevant. The average age of board members is 60. It is too old. Only 2% of board members are below the age of 55. It should be at least 10%. And this is another aspect of diversity, which is so important, and we have to change it to reduce the age and to have more young people who are much more relevant to the business than those that are currently around the board. In Israel, there is a goal for the governmental companies to have 20% of the board members below the age of 40. And I highly recommend that you will follow Accor Shadow XCOM, which is exactly based on this idea. Bring young people to the board, again, diversity, in order to make the decisions of the board much more relevant to a time like 2020, where things are changing so fast. And challenges that we had on March 1st are irrelevant on October 1st. When you have such board members, you suddenly allocate time for innovation, for budget, for innovation, and a lot more. And please, we can skip to the next slide, to the last slide. I hope that I was able to provide you with a concrete tip. As I've mentioned, there are other 9 tips. It is super important for governments and for companies to stay relevant. And the only way in a time where changes are so fast is to partner, is to collaborate with startups. And Israel, with this respect, is very, very strong asset for the Mediterranean. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. So we have a little bit of time now for discussion. Thanks everybody for staying with us. So first of all, I wanted to go back to Mr. Petrides, and it was great to hear your updated forecasts on growth and unemployment and so on, and also your expectations about when the economy would recover and the bounce back next year. Can I ask you just about the deficit, what fiscal deficit you expect in 2020, given these growth forecast revisions? So just to get some idea of the sort of deficit you're expecting and the increase in government debt in 2020. And obviously, Cyprus did have a very generous package or series of packages, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, but it's going to cost the state quite a lot of money. And do you see that being a constraint then going forward in terms of providing more support for businesses and households, through the winter and into 2021? Or do you think the government's quite well placed actually to manage that? And I guess the related question is about the banking sector. This is one of your 3 pillars, the reduction in NPL levels. A lot of progress has been made already, but it's still a significant burden. Is that going to hamper the government's efforts? Just to get some sense from you of how you see the budget outturn and what's the dynamics with government debt and NPLs and so on, and how that's going to influence the recovery in Cyprus. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I would say that we should always design policies within our means. And when it comes down to fiscal stimulus packages, they should never put at risk the overall fiscal sustainability of the country. And this is why at my early intervention, I did underline the fact that the fiscal space we had created in the past 7-8 years was a catalyst for allowing us to proceed with a very bold fiscal stimulus package that basically rescued the economy during this period. For 2020, I would expect a budget deficit equal to about 4.5%, which is not catastrophic, and it is quite manageable. We have deliberately increased public debt, but we have liquidity ranging to around 20% of our GDP. And before the end of the year, the public debt, which is about 120% of the GDP right now, will start having again a downward trend. So I think it is quite manageable. We are very careful in how we proceed with our fiscal policy. It is within our fiscal space, and we always have at the back of our mind the fact that this pandemic is characterized by a huge degree of uncertainty. So yes, we should have the means to intervene, more targeted, of course, to a lesser extent into 2021. But I think we are keeping the balance, and we are quite happy about how things are turning in regards to the prospects of the recovery. Now, regarding the NPLs, there was big progress in the past years. The NPLs they were reduced from around 50% to less than 30% of the total loans. Now there was a freeze in the procedure, the foreclosure procedures in the past months because of the pandemic. Nevertheless, I must underline that we are not renewing the public memorandum for the suspension of the payments, and one of the reasons is that having studied in depth the situation, both by the Ministry of Finance but also by the Central Bank of Cyprus, shows that the ability to pay is there. So I think that we do anticipate that the pandemic will not have a catastrophic effect, or will not lead to a surge of the NPLs in the future. But of course, as I said before twice, the situation is uncertain, and you should always have a careful eye on how things develop. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, certainly if the budget deficit comes in around that level, 4.5% of GDP, and growth comes in, or the contraction in Cyprus is as you project, that would make Cyprus one of the best performing probably economies in Europe in 2020. So let's hope that turns out to be the case. Just a couple of questions have come in for some of the other panelists, and so bear with me and to put some of them. So I guess this one is relevant for Mr. Philiopoulos, who I believe is still on the line, and Mr. Papathanasis, which is, again, just looking at the EU funds and the role of the EU funds. I guess one thing that we've heard quite a bit in recent weeks, I mean, this goes for Cyprus as well, of course, is that this unprecedented funds, very large sums, which will be available to Greece and Cyprus, are going to be a game changer in terms of bridging the investment gap, public investment gap, I guess, which has been problematic, certainly in Greece in recent years. But is that the wrong way to look at it? Do you think that actually the emphasis should be much more on looking at other kind of avenues of investment? And, we've heard different ones from Mr. Bolek and others, but do you expect FDI to take off? I mean, you sounded very positive about the prospects, and also that it's not investment interest is not confined to one or two sectors, but seems to be quite broadly based. So I'd just like to hear a bit more about that, the kind of how you look at the kind of role of public investment and the EU funds, and kind of broader business environment and it's the potential for attracting FDI in a way that hasn't really happened, hasn't really taken off in Greece in recent years. So over to you, Mr. Philiopoulos. Do you want to start, and then I'll turn to the alternate minister.
I think that the minister should, Minister Papathanasis should answer this question.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Hoy. A very interesting question. As I said before, FDI was quite low. The reason was quite low was that relatively to other EU member countries, was that the country was not attractive. We had a country that was not attractive to investments because of a very hard bureaucracy that would delay all investments. So as I said, this we've been changing continuously. And as Mr. Philiopoulos said in your previous question, we have not seen an investment to be seized or to stop proceeding during the crisis. So we see that there's a complete change in the view of Greece as a country of possible investment from investors, and of course we are working on that, trying to create or give more tax incentives. We are continuing in reducing bureaucracy. As I said, we are changing completely our digitization program on the public sector, making things much faster and easier. We enhance drastically technological mechanisms, digital technology, and other measures that will make things much faster. Of course, as I mentioned before, the judicial system, and we are reforming that. And another issue that seems to be on the Greek side is that we do have a lot of STEM graduates, and this is something that's very attractive for companies, especially in DG and innovation. It is very attractive to set up the innovation hubs here. Now, I think you mentioned about the investment and how we will manage and how we'll run rather the investment procedures. I think we are changing completely also all the laws pertaining to PPPs, to make things much more attractive and much more faster. And also we are changing the law for public procurement and public works to give the opportunity for the projects to start much faster. So actually there's a big change happening. It hasn't stopped, as Mr. Philiopoulos said, during the COVID crisis. And we are very, we are looking very focused on the demands of the investors. And we see a lot of things happening, as I mentioned, from investors from Israel, USA, and other European countries. So in that sense, we are very hopeful that things will go the proper way, and the RRF fund will be able to assist in creating a cyclic economy based on the value chains that are our main target from EU strategy, as it was announced in March 2020. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Minister. So, Mr. Philiopoulos, if you want to jump in as well and add anything, please do so. I've got a couple of final questions. I'm just turning back to you, Mr. Volek, looking at this kind of broad discussion of various, investment streams. How do you think your investment migration program is going to be a positive factor in Greece and Cyprus in the next 2 years, and this kind of recovery phase from the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, I think in both countries' sake, these programs will play quite an important role. So the pandemic has already had an impact on both economies, as it has all around the world. In 2019, if you look at from a tourism perspective, which is where a lot of the impact of the pandemic will take place, the tourism directly contributed to about 23 billion euros to Greece's economy. In 2020, that revenue is understandably is just sort of 20% of that amount. So tourism takings from abroad are not expected to top 600 to 700 million euros in the next couple of months through to December. The silver lining would come in the form of investment in the Golden Visa program if we're talking about Greece. Indeed, while Greece has lost an estimated 156 million euros in Golden Visa revenue so far this year, the program is sure to rebound once travel bans are lifted. And even across our offices around the world, we can see interest and uptake in various programs, and particularly these Mediterranean-based investment migration programs is picking up. I think at that point, it'll also be more enticing for investors as property prices will likely still be on the low side, but of course destined to rise. And then when considered in conjunction with the Greek government's non-dom program to attract wealthy individuals to reside in Greece, its strategy to enhance real estate and other related sectors through various tax initiatives, which Cyprus has also introduced. There's also in Greece a draft law proposing a flat income tax rate for foreign retirees who transfer their tax residence to Greece. I think it's clear that this Golden Visa program is an important element to what will have to be a multi-pronged approach to attract the much needed foreign direct investment.
Okay, thanks. So we've got to draw to an end, but I just want to finish with conclude this panel with the final question. So, Mr. Green, emphasize that particular slide and of the 10 points. The one that you said was most important was the commitment point. So do you see a commitment here in Cyprus and Greece to change, to invest in innovation? Do you think the pandemic has been an accelerant of change in this regard for Greece and Cyprus? I mean, this question, it's not just for you, Mr. Green. You can tell me how you think Greece and Cyprus are placed in this respect, but for any of them like to jump in and answer this. So, Mr. Green, maybe.
As far as I know, I see quite a lot of interest and really doing things in the right direction. But I think that we have here people that are from the ground that can tell us more. And if they want, they can share about their activity with this respect of innovation.
Okay. Mr. Philiopoulos,
if I could, yeah.
Mr. Petridis, did you want to say something?
If I was going to intervene, I would say that actual innovation and the startups are a new sector for Cyprus. A few years ago, I wouldn't expect that we could have improved so much. Myself, under my previous hat, when I was deputy minister to the president, and we were trying to look what is happening worldwide. I did visit Israel And we took lessons from Israel. And we made a modern legislative framework regarding startups, startup visas, regarding attracting innovative companies, having certified innovative companies. And in a few years, I was amazed to see a startup community with young people flourishing and attracting slowly foreign direct investment. At the same time, we saw universities, newly established universities, becoming first at EU level in attracting funds, horizontal funds from the EU for innovation programs. So I would say that innovation is part of sustainability, and as policymakers, we have to equip it with the right supervisory and legislative frameworks and the incentives, and take lessons from people who know, and countries who are ahead of us, like Israel. And this is one of our major efforts as Cyprus. It's already working within in just a few years, but the prospects are great. And it adds up to what they're trying to achieve: sustainability, an economic model based on sustainability and talent.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that we are out of time. We've run over our time quite a bit, and I'm going to be running into the next session. So I'd like to thank all of you. I think we've had a really full discussion. Thank you very much for your contributions. It was really interesting. I think everybody listening will have learned an awful lot. So thanks again on behalf of The Economist. Thanks for joining. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
There's now going to be a 5-minute break before we commence the next session. Thank you very much.
It is crystal clear that Greece's highly skilled and sophisticated human capital is one of the country's key pillars for supporting future investments.
Greece's greatest advantage is its people. The country's excellent human capital and the specialized know-how, particularly in food research, has created a complete ecosystem of agricultural schools and research institutes staffed with trained food technologists who can help develop innovative solutions needed to meet the demands of today's marketplace.
Imerys benchmarked several locations before choosing Athens. The choice of Athens means for us the ability to access to a talented pool of employees with strong expertise and language skills.
The belief is that Greece is attractive for international companies because Greece means growth. There is still a lot to do in Greece. Greece means controlled risk. First, because the situation is much more healthy economically, and second, because there is the umbrella of the European community.
We believe Greece is definitely a destination to be considered by any international group, and being part of the European Union makes the country more secure and safe.
Greece's strategic location, its constantly upgraded infrastructure and growing and dynamic startup ecosystem offers an unmatched framework to cultivate long-term investments.
Greece is gifted for renewable energy. It has plenty of wind, plenty of sun and hydro capacity.
Greece, with its agricultural tradition, offers great food products and high-quality raw material, and is famous for its Mediterranean diet.
We consider Greece as an outward-looking economy with great potential in a wide variety of sectors, spanning from shipping and tourism to ICT, energy, life sciences, and supply chain.
The country offers a combination of historic heritage, Mediterranean lifestyle, amazing beaches, and a well-established tourism industry. The real estate market is very competitive, with attractive and profitable returns on investment.
A great place to live and work.
Hello and welcome back to The Economist's New York East Med Summit. My name is Joan Hoey and I'm Director for Europe at The Economist Intelligence Unit. I'd like to welcome all of you to our next panel, Boosting the Region's Recovery Through Stability and Cooperation. So in this panel, we're still going to be focused on doing business in the Eastern Med region and looking at how the region can attract more investment. But we're going to have a look at from a regional perspective and look at the opportunities for new partnerships and new growth models. So we have, again, 4 speakers who I'd like to introduce now. The first speaker is Shelley Porges, co-founder and managing director of Beyond the Billion and the $1 Billion Fund for Women. Welcome. The next speaker is Michaelis Mikhail, who's the chairman of Invest Cyprus. The next speaker is Aristos Konstantin, trade commissioner at the Cyprus Embassy Trade Center, New York. And the final speaker on the panel this afternoon is Alex Boulouris, who is the CFA and co-head of research at Wood & Company, which is a leading investment bank in the region. So welcome all of you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us at the summit today. Really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say and continuing the discussion that we've had in previous panels. So let's turn to you first of all, Shelley, to get your thoughts.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And thank you to the Economist team, especially to Nektaria Passarvakis, President and CEO of Economist Events for Greece, Cyprus, Malta, and Southeastern Europe, as well as to my friend John Georgoulas, who has involved me for a long time now in various economic efforts in Cyprus and in the region. So it's been quite a pleasure. Thank you. And on that note of engaging in economic initiatives, let me share with you an opportunity for GDP growth and innovation in the Mediterranean region that perhaps you have not considered to this point. Imagine if you had developed a technique for creating a human organ out of a patient's own stem cell. And then imagine if you also obtained a patent for that, obtained regulatory approval, started a company, mobilized hospitals, clinics, and medical practitioners to deploy that technology. And then imagine if you still couldn't get funded to scale it. Imagine all the lives lost for lack of human organs. This is exactly what happened to a young innovator named Eleni Antoniadou, a Greek-born American who pitched to us at the Cartier Women's Initiative Award a number of years ago when I was president of the North American jury. We were so impressed with this young woman, this young innovator, and all that she accomplished in a very relatively short amount of time. Well, Eleni won the Cartier Award. And the Cartier, by the way, the Cartier Women's Initiative is the largest women's business plan competition in the world with over $1 million of non-dilutive grants. She won the Cartier Award. She was challenged to find further funding, however, and she certainly wasn't alone. In 2019, women-founded companies received less than 3% of all venture capital globally. 3%. And even if you counted any company that had even one woman founder on a gender diverse teams, that only brought you to 12% totally, meaning that 88% of all venture capital was going to male-only founding teams. This despite the fact that women are innovating across the board and delivering superior returns that are 23 to 63% higher than all male founding teams. And when I say across the board, I am talking about AI robotics, AgTech, EdTech, CleanTech, FinTech, cyber, and so much more. Name a sector, B2B SaaS, et cetera. Women are innovating in these sectors. And yet, despite a revolution in women's launching businesses across the globe, in the Mediterranean, the rate of women's entrepreneurship is 2 to 3 times lower than the worldwide rate. What if we could boost this by providing networks, resources, and funding to scale these enterprises? Can we afford to leave half the world's population, half these countries' populations behind? I don't think so. The OECD estimates that by further enabling women's economic empowerment in EU member states, it would lead to GDP per capita increase between 6 and almost 10%. In my work at the US State Department as Secretary Hillary Clinton's Senior Advisor for Global Entrepreneurship, I was proud to foster entrepreneurial ecosystems that would advance women as well as men, contributing to both innovation and economic growth in the region. As an Israeli-born American, I was especially proud to do this in Israel, my country of birth, as well as in Greece. I then continued to do this work after I left the State Department when I was invited to be part of an international advisory business council for the president of Cyprus a number of years ago. And in fact, Minister Petridis mentioned that he was deputy minister at that time, and we worked closely with him, and I worked closely with him as well. And since then, my focus has been on building a venture ecosystem that funds women-led innovation. Because without the funding, we can't scale these innovations for the benefit of all. The fact that all male teams were getting 88% of all venture capital globally was the opportunity that we at the $1 Billion Fund for Women saw, and now beyond the billion that we are addressing. We have mobilized over 90 funds globally, investing over $1 billion into women-founded companies because we know that when you invest in women, you're in good company. So this is our story. Please run the video. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Shelley. Thanks. That's certainly very inspiring story and video. And we'll be sure to come back to this in the discussion. So let me introduce the next speaker, Mikhail, who is the chairman of Invest Cyprus. Welcome. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon from Cyprus. And it's a pleasure to be in this esteemed panel discussion. On behalf of the Cyprus Investment Promotion Agency, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you, since we are sponsors at today's summit, with a view to showcase how we can boost our region's recovery through stability and cooperation. It gives us great pleasure to be sponsoring this successful event, and thank you all for participating. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced us to carry out the summit online, but I sincerely hope that the circumstances will soon allow for us to meet in person. The title of today's event, the New York EastMed Summit, A Sea of Conflict or a Sea of Opportunities, indicates, among others, the importance of cooperation among the countries of the region in order to create new partnerships and solid bonds between them, especially now more than ever before, with the challenges the COVID-19 pandemic has brought and will bring in the near future. The international competition for attracting investments will be more intense than ever. Cyprus has been named the most improved country in the IMD World Competitiveness Center 2020 report, climbing 11 spots. More specifically, the country now ranks 30th out of the total 63 countries. As for the foreign direct investment records, Cyprus ranks second, just behind the United States of America. Behind these results lies the ability of our country to attract international investments, the adaptability of government policy, and the long-term growth of employment. Cyprus has all the prerequisites that companies need to invest here. Among them is the strategic location of the island, being at the crossroads of three continents, Europe, Africa, and Asia, and perhaps the most stable country, both politically and economically, in the Middle East region, offering wide access to the markets. Additionally, the fact that our country is a modern EU member state, offering international businesses the ideal environment to establish their international and regional headquarters, is also a significant factor. Furthermore, the country presents strong economic growth, has tax-saving talent, low operating costs, and a competitive IP regime. Moreover, as a dynamic business center, Cyprus offers an abundance of highly educated and skilled individuals, multilingual in their majority, ready to serve the needs of any business. Special emphasis is given to promoting the island as one of the top headquartering destinations, especially for technology and naval sectors. As a thriving international community, Cyprus is home to a number of global ICT companies that use the island as a hub for software development, system integration, testing services, and research and development activities while serving clients in Europe, Middle East, and beyond. Cyprus is well positioned to cater for the needs of US tech companies to establish an EU base and serve their international clientele through Southeast Europe with close proximity with the Israeli tech hub. That is why I believe that Cyprus can play a vital role in boosting the region's growth and competitiveness, no matter how long the pandemic will last. As for the tourism and hospitality sector, Invest Cyprus has launched the Tourist Invest Unit, which specializes in promoting investment opportunities in the specific sector, focusing on attracting multi-million investments into large-scale infrastructure projects. Cyprus is a destination of choice for doing business, a destination of excellence, quality, and great prospect. It goes without saying that Invest Cyprus is strongly committed to providing all the necessary support in order to help existing as well as future investors' plans thrive. We are very confident for the months to come. We did it before, and we will do it again. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. So let's turn to our third speaker, Aristos Konstantin, who's the Trade Commissioner at the Cyprus Embassy Trade Center in New York. Welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thank you. And good morning from New York. It's cloudy and rainy here. So given the time constraints, I'll do my best, I think, to address the three questions posed to the panel in the agenda. So firstly, is there optimism for the region? Absolutely. That's a resounding yes. From a regional perspective, what we're seeing in the East Med, granted with the exception of Turkey, is an unprecedented degree of cooperation and collaboration. And it is secular and modernist. And the defining factor at the core of this growing regional integration is balance. Balance of interests, balance of values. And this is a very powerful model. Just last week in Cairo, representatives of Egypt, Greece, Italy, Cyprus, Jordan, and Israel concluded an agreement to convert the East Med Gas Forum into a regional organization, one that is open to everyone. France has already requested to join the forum earlier this year, and the United States is a permanent observer, which lends important international weight. But it's important to note that this is not just about natural gas. While energy may have been a catalyst, the collaboration within the region has expanded far beyond energy. Cooperation, particularly between Cyprus, Israel, and Greece, spans almost every conceivable field, from counterterrorism to environment, technology, and trade. And I don't think it would be overstating to say that the East Med, with Cyprus at its center, has become a true model for regional collaboration and integration. And this integration brings with it opportunity for growth and investment and the ability to tap previously untapped synergies and to build and connect markets. Now, within a broader geoeconomic context, why is the integration of the East Med so important? Leading to our next sort of question, how do our new partnerships translate into new opportunities? Well, the world has become, and at least for the foreseeable future, I believe will continue becoming more and more multipolar, both politically and economically. And I know that many don't like to accept this as a foregone conclusion, but it is what it is. German Chancellor Angela Merkel acknowledged as much earlier this year in a Financial Times interview when she noted Europe can be a pole that takes on its share of responsibility in a multipolar world. Of course, the US trade war with China has been a big factor in accelerating the move away from globalization. And some are no doubt hopeful that in the event of a change in administration come November, US-China tensions would de-escalate. Personally, whilst the rhetoric, in that eventuality at least, whilst the rhetoric may come down a notch, I don't believe that will be the case, at least not in any meaningful way. The COVID pandemic has also contributed. It revealed very early on the fragility of modern supply chains and sparked a push toward more secure, regionalized manufacturing and supply and shorter, smarter supply chains. The EU has also indicated a move in this direction. As the EU Trade Commissioner said in April, there is a need for the EU and its companies to diversify supply chains and to reduce reliance on individual countries. But, as he noted, that doesn't mean bringing all production back to Europe. So while Eastern Europe could now play a larger role in the EU supply chain, a relocation of production away from Asia, from China, could also include Northern Africa and other East Med countries. And Cyprus specifically, the region as a whole, but Cyprus specifically could also benefit through its role as an investment, trade and logistical hub. With regard to the US, I think these points that I've just mentioned also come into play. But as Michalis said in his talk just a moment ago, Cyprus is very well positioned to be an ideal base for US multinationals, private equity, and funds for operating and investing in the wider region, as well as in the European Union itself. And this is especially true since, after Brexit, Cyprus is now one of the very few common law jurisdictions left in the EU. and that is not something to be understated. Given a good example would be the rise of ESG funds investing in emerging markets. Cyprus is very well positioned to be an ideal jurisdiction from which to manage sustainable investments in the wider region and beyond into other emerging markets. So given the current climate, the EastMed as a region has the opportunity to expand its role as a key geostrategic and economic player. And in this new world of multilateralism, we have all the makings of an important swing region, able to facilitate both strong intra-regional commerce and trade, but also inter-regional commerce and trade. Moving on to the last point about a more resilient growth model, and I think that applies also to the region, but I'll keep it specific on Cyprus in this particular instance. So in the shorter term, obviously, as is mentioned frequently in the past panels, the economic impact of the COVID pandemic is not something we can just gloss over. Travel and tourism have been particularly hard hit, and unemployment in these sectors is undoubtedly a point of concern. But Cyprus has already done an outstanding job of stemming the fallout. And going forward, we have an opportunity to take decisive and in some cases overdue actions to diversify and strengthen our economy and generate employment and growth in new sectors. And to this end, public-private partnerships will no doubt be very important, as will be the intra-regional synergies I've just talked about. And for one, I believe our agricultural and industrial sectors have enormous potential, both as engines for growth and generators of employment, but there are equally promising opportunities in other sectors, healthcare, manufacturing, particularly tech and clean tech. And as Minister Petrides mentioned in the previous panel, Cyprus also has the seeds of a growing startup ecosystem, which has great prospects for growth. And let's not forget that the broader region has nearly 500 million people with a growing and significantly younger population. These young societies are rapidly urbanizing, and in the coming decades, the region will evolve into another leading consumer-based and services economy, and will begin to resemble Western Europe more and more in its consumption habits. And we are very well positioned to benefit from that development. Look, we have the advantage that we are a small and adaptable economy with a very highly educated and versatile population. And I believe that we have what it takes to become the equivalent of a Singapore for our region. All we have to do is rise to the occasion. Thank you.
Thanks. That's really interesting perspective, regional perspective there. So let me invite our final panelist, Alex Boulouris, the CFA and co-head research at Wood & Company. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today, and looking forward to your comments.
Thank you, Joan, and many thanks for the invitation. Hello, everybody. Indeed, I work from Wood & Company, and we are quite active in the region. We are looking at mostly the equity markets in Greece, Cyprus, and Turkey, but we are active all over emerging Europe. I mean, we are optimistic, as the panelists said before. We think that the region can indeed grow post-COVID, obviously. Cyprus, in particular, and Greece, that I will look more closely, I think they have the capacity to return to a growth pattern that is, I think, above average, let's say. I mean, Cyprus, if we look historically, it has done an amazing recovery post the banking crisis it faced in 2013, with growth rates of 3 to 4% every year. I think the main reason for this impressive performance since 2013 has been that the government of Cyprus has taken serious ownership of the reforms taking place. And this has been, I think, instrumental in bringing and in making the country more competitive, improving tourist flows, continuing the solid performance in the financial services business, and so on. And now, obviously, the pandemic has interrupted this process. And the question, of course, is whether we can return back to these pre-COVID growth rates as soon as the let's say, vaccine is found. I mean, there are some vulnerabilities in Cyprus. For example, the NPLs in the system remain quite high. Payment culture is rather weak still, despite all the efforts that have been made. This maybe has been exacerbated recently by the very generous moratoriums introduced, which is far more generous than other EU countries. Maybe other vulnerabilities include that part of the growth is attributed to reasons that may not be sustainable in the long run. For example, domestic consumption and the property market growth. And I would say also that restructuring of the public sector and union has been relatively soft, despite the efforts that have been made. Having said that, I mean, there are clearly, I think, we're still optimistic because the banking system has made serious progress in recapitalizing, in proceeding with large transactions, in selling NPLs. So I think that definitely the reforms taken place over the past couple of years will start to bear fruit post-COVID. We have seen a strengthening of household insolvency laws, the absorption of cooperative banks. All this has made the system far more sustainable in order to be able to withstand the COVID impact, which is also significant, but also to be able after that to grow, I think, at a decent pace. Now, on the fiscal side, the Cyprus has been generated very solid primary surplus over the past few years. So I think the country stands probably ahead of its European peers, as the return to deficits that we see at the moment is due to the pandemic and not a structural issue. So I think the return to primary surpluses for Cyprus could be actually easier for European peers. And in order to keep this positive momentum, I would say that the overall performance, even in 2020, which is the year of COVID, and in Cyprus, where the country is quite dependent on tourism, is actually better than Eurozone averages. So the country will not decline and the recession will not be steeper than the Eurozone, despite tourism accounting for about 20% of GDP. And in addition, I would say that the public debt to GDP, although it has increased to 115% approximately, it should be this year, it definitely does not stand out compared to other European countries anymore as it used to in the past. So I think there is a reason for optimism, definitely. And I think there are good grounds that once COVID starts a vaccine is found or whatever, I think we're going to see growth returning to hopefully the pre-COVID era, but let's see, definitely something better than the average 1 or 2%, I would say. Now in Greece, the situation is a bit different, touching a bit upon Greece as well. I mean, the country was growing at a slower pace before the pandemic, and 2020 was supposed to be the year that Greece will grow above average and enjoy all the reforms that have been made over the past 10 years. So it was really bad luck, let's say, but it's not all doom and gloom. Certainly, Greece has become far more competitive, and we see that in the strong growth in exports and tourism. The banking system has also been recapitalized and in better shape. And also here, the government appears committed in proceeding with the reform efforts, proceeding with privatizations. And I think this is the key at the end of the day, taking ownership of all these reforms, which maybe was not evident in the past and led to both Greece and Cyprus going into a crisis and gradually getting away from it. So yes, to finalize, I think we are optimistic that post-COVID, these countries have a decent growth opportunity ahead of them. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Well, thanks all of you for keeping to the time. That means we've got a little bit of time for some Q&A and discussion, which is very good. So, Shelley, let's start with you. And I was really interested to hear about your project and what you've been doing globally. So I just wanted to focus in a bit more on this region in terms of what you're already doing here, and how your initiative can make a difference in this particular region. What do you see as the obstacles for women who are maybe at the cutting edge in terms of innovation and startups and so on, what are the difficulties that they are facing in this region? And how much of a difference? I mean, this is a feature of the labour market, obviously, in Greece and Cyprus. The participation rate of women is fairly low. And I guess it's just basic macroeconomics that if we had more women involved in the labour market, that it would, make quite a difference, or could potentially make quite a difference to these economies. So just to hear a little bit more maybe from you about how you perceive the particular obstacles in this region and what can be done about it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for asking. Yeah, so initially, your point about women's participation in general in the economy is quite true. And it does actually then have reverberations in the innovation economy, because so many innovators get their start by identifying issues that they recognized as they were working in other facets, whether it's for large companies or during their student years, whatever. Related to that is also lower participation generally of women in business and tech fields. So that's certainly. But having said that, for those women who do break through, who just like Eleni Antoniadi, she had 5 degrees. She made up for many other women. That's all I can say. It's not just about where they came from. It's how they're received. And so for women who've got the tech degrees, who've got the knowledge and ability to identify opportunities for innovation, not just for women, but for that would benefit us all. What they're facing is a series of challenges. First of all, they start their businesses to begin with less capital, because their networks are smaller, their access to business people is smaller, and we as an ecosystem have a lot that we could do about it. Governments can do something about it, certainly innovation clusters, hubs. We were hearing a lot about innovation hubs in Cyprus and Greece and Israel. This is one way that if we do more outreach and more engagement of women, this would be really helpful. We see that women are participating in these hubs at a lower rate, and when they exit the accelerators, they're getting about 1/3 of the capital that the men who are going through the exact same accelerators. Now, why is this happening? It's happening because, one, there are very few, much fewer, about 13% of investment decision makers in the venture industry are women. And frankly, even though, even with the women decision makers, and they are growing because they're starting their own funds, that's what we're seeing in our consortium. Nevertheless, women are asked different questions than men, and frankly, get about $1 million less per venture on average than men. So there's a whole array. And just to give you a great example of that, in our conversations of mobilizing venture funds, I was connected to the head of a multi-billion-dollar European investment fund. And when he started the call out, he said, Shelley, you must understand that when women come through our doors, they are treated absolutely equally to the men. So my response was, that's fantastic. I'm excited to hear that. So how many women-founded companies have you invested in? Well, they had over 100 companies on their website, which I went through. I couldn't find one. So I thought maybe they're hiding them. Maybe they're on a different website. But I asked him the question. Radio silence. He could not respond. Number 2, I said, well, that's great. Maybe when women come through your doors, they're treated absolutely equally. But have you ever thought about what it takes for a woman to get to and through your doors before she even faces your investment committee? These are all issues. It's network issues and it's access issues are first and foremost. Secondly, it's being prepared for the ask. And thirdly, it's ensuring that, when the capital is available, that they're being asked the same questions, which we know they're not. And the European Union, actually, the European Commission, and the EIB, European Investment Bank, just published a report in June that details all the many steps of issues that we need to address in order to ensure that we're catalyzing women innovators who can solve some of our great problems and also drive economic growth. So I encourage you to all look at that. It's a comprehensive report. It also gives us some breakdowns in regions and so forth.
Thank you very much, Shelley. Anybody else on the panel, happy to hear your thoughts on Shelley's presentation and what she said as well. I'm sure that's all of interest to you too. So Michalis, turning to you again, you really emphasised in your opening remarks the importance of regional cooperation, and how that's been really decisive for Cyprus, which does seem to have emerged as this, real hub in the region, and obviously with Greece and Israel and the US dimension as well. It's this really seems to have taken off. Now, do you think that would have happened anyway? Do you think that, obviously it's to do with the hydrocarbons, development and potential and so on in the region, but do you think that the pandemic has really accelerated that trend? Would we have seen, for example, all these memorandums being signed in recent weeks, the establishment or the formalization of the EastMed Gas Forum as a regional organization? Do you think those things were just, natural occurrence, or have things actually speeded up? And when you look at the prospects for Cyprus, what do you think is more important, the development of those relationships, or some of the measures that the ministers have outlined earlier in terms of the government's national plan to improve the business environment and the other initiatives that have been taken? Obviously, it's not either or, but in the balance of things, what do you think has been most important for Cyprus in recent years and looking forward?
Yeah, well, thank you, Hai. Nothing comes by chance. You have to see what your country needs. And, fortunately enough, or unfortunately, I don't know, we live in a region that is quite turbulent. And we need to keep the position of being a very stable country. As I said in my opening remarks, both politically and economically, that we can support our substance as a country of services. And it's very important for us that we manage to sign not only the recent memorandums that you have seen, but also in the last 2-3 years, we signed MOUs with Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, and of course Greece, in order to be able to create this stability in the region. And this is very important for Cyprus. Of course, what is more important, as you said, it's to keep sustainability, as our minister said before. It's very important for us to keep this momentum of growth that we continue to have. And we believe that after the pandemic, whenever that happens, we are going to have the right tools to move our economy forward as we did before. Cypriots are very hardworking people. And of course, we need a stability inside the country so that we can create this liquidity going. But also we need the foreign investment in order to keep the growth. The internal stability and liquidity is not enough to get the growth going up. The last years of 3 to 4% of rate of growth, it was not by chance. We had a lot of foreign direct investment through many tools and decisions of the government, and we took exactly these important factors in order to keep our economy in the right direction. And this allowed us to have the proper cooperation with all these countries of the region, and these MOUs are mainly targeted on exchange of information and exchange of other kind of cooperation as far as investments and entrepreneurship are concerned. So it's very important for us to keep this momentum going.
Thank you very much. So final question for the other two panelists, Mr. Constantine and Mr. Boulouris. So Mr. Constantine, in your introduction, it was very interesting. You approached it from a kind of broader, geopolitical perspective as well, and how the region fits into this, and obviously certain trends, geopolitical trends, have been again accelerated as a result of the pandemic, including with regard to supply chains and deglobalization and so on. So, and from Mr. Boulouris, you're involved in the broader region as well, Eastern Europe. So I wanted to really ask you, how this particular region stands to, benefit from some of these trends, perhaps. So if we're talking about reshoring or nearshoring, do you think that Cyprus and Greece have an advantage maybe over the broader region, Eastern Europe region? It'd be interesting to hear from both of you your perspective on that. And I guess it's also about comparing political stability in the broader Eastern Europe region and in this region, how labour markets, infrastructure, and so on. How well placed do you think Greece and Cyprus are to benefit from some of the geopolitical changes that we're seeing?
Who would you like to go first?
Yeah.
Well, as I said, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go on. Yes.
Okay, great. So, as I said in my remarks, granted, Eastern Europe is cheap and competent and will no doubt play a larger role as things shift to closer or shorter supply chains. But as I said before, given the proximity, our proximity and our access to the West Asian markets, to North African and East African markets, and I'm speaking of Cyprus now. Some of these aspects are also true for Greece, but Cyprus and Greece are not identical in terms of the role that they can play in within the region or vis-a-vis Europe. So Cyprus, as I said before, has some advantages in that it is both common law and has a very broad network of not just double tax treaties, but investment treaties as well, which allows for companies operating to avail themselves to the protections of those treaties. So if you're looking to access emerging markets or markets in the region, we make tremendous sense, especially for Western interests, to base their operations out of. There is possibly potential for Cyprus to even be to benefit as a supplier, particularly in sort of pharmaceutical and healthcare. But I would say in that narrow sort of focus, that would be some areas. Beyond that, in the broader or larger geopolitical context, and you have to have a broader geopolitical context when you talk about future growth, whether it's for the region itself or for the country. As I said in my remarks, I think we have tremendous potential to be a very important swing region in the current climate and the climate going forward, at least for the foreseeable future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boulouris. What's your view on this?
Sure. I would say that both Greece and Cyprus, if we compare them also with Eastern European countries, I think they need to focus on their advantages. Obviously, I don't think that you can expect Greece or Cyprus to become the industrial power hubs that you see, for example, in Romania or the Czech Republic or Poland, building cars for Germans and things like that. I think this is rather unlikely. On the other hand, there are several other advantages that they can focus on, where they are very competitive. And I think so achieving growth through other means is possible, whether it is tourism, it's financial services, it is energy, technology. There are various, I think, pharmaceuticals, various, I think, industries and sectors that they can be competitive in order to grow. So it doesn't mean that because we don't have the advantages of Eastern Europe, we cannot still grow at a decent rate that is above average. And in addition, I would stress as well that they're both Eurozone economies. That is also quite significant and provides another stability factor, in my view at least. So that's another factor to stress. So yes, there are differences, but I think definitely there is ability to grow in the future, as long as the focus remains, market-oriented, to a market-oriented approach, and not to, believing in aspirations that are not feasible. Let's see.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank all of you very much. We're unfortunately out of time. We're running well over time, actually. And we have one final panel with speakers standing by. But I think it was a very useful panel and provided some regional and broader perspective for the discussions that we had earlier in the day. So thank you very much for your insightful contributions, and thanks for joining the conference today, and particularly thanks to Invest Cyprus as well for your support for this summit. And just to echo what you said at the beginning, Michalis, I hope that we're going to be doing this in person next year in New York.
Absolutely.
And I hope to see all of you there, definitely. Absolutely. For sure. Let's make that happen. So thank you very much again. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye. We're going to break now for 5 minutes, and then we'll have our final panel of the summit. Thank you very much.
Let's build a better world for investing. Let's create jobs, build bridges, ensure prosperity. As investment management professionals, let's measure up. CFA Institute.
For us, location is kind of the key feature for any new business that we develop. And if you look at Cyprus, Cyprus is ideally and strategically located in the East Mediterranean.
It really is at the center of where you want to be.
When Melco Resorts decided to expand beyond our Asian roots, we spent the better part of 2 years going around the globe looking for expansion opportunities. Ultimately, we decided on Cyprus for 3 reasons. The first of which is that Cyprus represents a unique geography. Secondly, the stability of the local government here was something that was very strong and very positive for our investment outlook. But third and most importantly was in fact the pro-business stance that the government really takes.
Investment decisions in any market have to rest on 4 main pillars: sound macroeconomic fundamentals, competent government, an efficient and equitable legal and judicial system, and a predictable fiscal environment. And Cyprus scores very highly on all 4. We are seeing an increase in the registration of managed specialty funds, which shows that there is liquidity ready to be invested in advanced financial products. What we want is to be an active contributor to the development and growth of Cyprus. We will seize every opportunity that arises.
If we look at what we have done so far, we have roughly invested about 300 million euros here in the facility that the interview is taking place. Looking forward, we are very keen to further invest in this infrastructure. Firstly, by looking forward to participate in the LNG markets that will be opening up here in Cyprus in the next few years. And we see that as a great future prospect for Cyprus and also for us and our infrastructure to further invest in this growing market.
The one big surprise we had was just how strong the local market was and the availability of local talent.
Cyprus definitely feels like a place where something is always happening. First of all, you have a great infrastructure here. Great hospitals, great schools, great roads, great airports to and from Europe and the rest of the world. Then, from a business perspective, you have a very reliable legal system that's fast, efficient, cost-effective, and that is supported by all of the excellent law firms that are here on the island, which are really market leaders in their respective fields. The Cypriots are incredibly proactive, incredibly dynamic, incredibly can-do people, and incredibly educated too. And everything that the Cypriot shipping maritime cluster needs is pretty much here. There is nothing better than to be running on the beach when the sun comes up. For me, it's fantastic.
If you're asking me what do I enjoy most in Cyprus, I would have a simple answer. It's the people. The people, the people, and the people. But also the hospitality, the friendliness, the warmth, and the beauty of this country.
This is an absolutely ideal place not only to work but also to live.
So from that standpoint, I think if Cyprus isn't on your radar already, it deserves to be. And if it's something that you looked at and decided it wasn't worth digging a little bit deeper, I encourage you to take a second look.
I have absolutely no hesitation whatsoever on a personal or professional level telling other would-be investors to hurry up and get over here to Cyprus.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. My name is Joan Hoey. I'm Director for Europe at the Economist Intelligence Unit, and we're now going to begin the final panel of this EastMed Summit, New York EastMed Summit, organised by the Economist Group. I'm delighted to introduce our speakers for the final panel, which is going to focus on energy security in light of recent geopolitical developments. So to introduce them in turn, we have Francis Fannon, Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of Energy Resources at the US Department of State, Natasha Pilides, Minister of Energy, Commerce and Industry of the Republic of Cyprus, Yanis Maniatis, the former Minister for Environment, Energy and Climate Change of Greece, and Yaniv Friedman, Deputy CEO of Delek Drilling LP, Avner Oil. There's going to be a slight change in the order of speakers, with Yaniv Friedman going to speak third because Yaniv has to leave. He has a meeting and will make his introductory remarks, and then unfortunately we'll have to leave us. So really sorry about that, Yaniv, and that we've run over time, kind of understandable. We've had a lot of really interesting discussions all day long. So let's get on with the panel, and let me introduce Francis Fannon. Welcome. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today, and we're really looking forward to hearing your remarks. So over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here with you virtually. I'm sorry that, of course, we're doing this virtually. I enjoyed the discussion in person before, but I think I'm in the next best place. I'm calling in from Kavala, Greece. I joined Secretary Pompeo on his trip here, and I think that just underscores the degree and the level of commitment from the U.S. government of our focus, of course, on the bilateral relationship with respect to Greece, but also more broadly in the Eastern Med region. We see the development of energy and where it provides a catalyst for cooperation amongst countries, and where this energy market, this evolution of an energy market, that but for the degree of cooperation amongst states wouldn't be developed, because you're dealing with domestic populations, domestic demand centers that are frankly insufficient to justify large-scale investment. But through cooperation, they're creating an entire market. And it's really a dynamic situation. The U.S. level of commitment is significant through a multiple fora, including an organization called the 3+1, which includes Cyprus, Israel, and Greece, and the U.S. And we run a cooperative working group on that. But I'm also here, I'm going to continue on from Greece to go on to Sofia, and then on to Skopje. We very much see this Greece as this gateway to Europe, certainly to the Balkans, and then this energy market with Israel, with Egypt, with Cyprus, all connecting and working together for shared economic prosperity and this new gateway in through Europe, which we're seeing Greece move forward with a variety of projects and infrastructure projects connecting that north-south, connecting to Bulgaria, looking to connect to North Macedonia, developing increased import infrastructure through the port of Alexandroupoli, and just the commitment that U.S. companies have had in this region and continue to have. I get asked quite frequently about what is my prognosis of the development of the region, and of course there's obvious controversy in some quarters. But I watch, my answer is I look where the capital's flowing. And I think of course the Chevron's move in the region, multi-billion dollars with their merger with Noble. I see ExxonMobil's commitment is continuing. It's extremely dynamic. And there's plenty of positive news stories that are meaningful, such as the Abraham Accords, we see Israel with Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. It's reflective of the region coming to terms with this collaboration, this economic opportunity. And I would just also note that recently we had the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, which the U.S. is an observer, or seeking to be an observer to. And my friend Tarek Al-Mullah, the minister there, he said gas is a peacemaker. And I thought that that's an appropriate way. You know, we see this economic activity continuing on and building new cooperative models. So we're extremely excited about it. We're committed to the region. And my travel here is another demonstration of that. Of course, we remain concerned with provocative actions by Turkey. And we've made, the Secretary has made those statements quite clear. We really are continuing to push for the parties to come to discussion and have that peaceful diplomatic engagement is really the only way forward. And that's what we're encouraging Turkey to do. And we've been encouraged by Greece and how they're being so pragmatic and thoughtful and open to dialogue in that regard. And if anyone has, I would just like to point to the recently issued U.S.-Greek statement from the Secretary's visit, which speaks to these issues and calls for maritime discussions. So I'm looking forward to the dialogue and participation in this panel. Thank you so much, and I look forward to having a robust discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fannon. I mean, we're so grateful actually that you've taken time out of your really busy schedule from this trip that you've taken with Pompeo to join us for this discussion. Yeah, it's really a very timely discussion. So thanks once again, and I'm delighted that you can stay on for the discussion. So let's turn next to Natasha, who's Minister of Energy, Commerce and Industry for the Republic of Cyprus. Over to you, Natasha.
Thank you very much. And first of all, let me say how lovely it is to be here, even virtually, and very sorry that we can't all be in the same room, but this is the next best thing. So thank you for organising, and many thanks to Mr. Fannin for the very constructive start to the discussion. I can only second what he said about collaboration being key to the efforts that we're making to develop the EastMed gas corridor. It's extremely important for us as Cyprus, being a small country in the region, to achieve this level of collaboration, which has been moving forward and has been developing very, very constructively, I think, through the 3+1 that was mentioned by Mr. Fannin earlier, but also through the EMGF. The Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum was signed only last week, and only 20 months after the initial efforts started to be developed, and of course the important initiative by Egypt. It is extremely important, I think, that all 7 founding countries actually signed the statute of the EMGF, and that is indicative of all the countries' willingness to support this effort and to basically responsibly, sustainably take advantage of the wealth that the region has in terms of the gas discoveries, and also to possibly extend that to other areas as well in the future. So the EMGF is a very important step forward. I think that we will see future developments that will be very very useful in terms of the tangible next steps. And of course, we're very much looking forward to the development of many other projects which will be discussed, some of which will be discussed in the context of the EMGF and others bilaterally and trilaterally with regards to both energy, both gas and other forms of energy. For example, two other important projects for Cyprus are the Euro-Asia and Euro-Africa interconnectors, the electricity grids which are going to connect Israel, Cyprus and Greece, and also Egypt, Cyprus and Greece. We're really hoping that Cyprus can play a part in the sharing of resources around the EastMed, but also with Europe, with Africa and with Asia on a much larger scale. And we hope that this can enable all of the countries in the Eastern Mediterranean region to move towards greener economies where various steps in the strategy will be followed to actually achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, which is actually the goal of the EU. Now, undoubtedly, we've had quite a few challenges emerging from the pandemic, obviously, and the recent and the economic repercussions that it has had, but also the practical repercussions which have made it difficult, at least within 2020, to progress with plans related to our gas discoveries. So, as you know, there was postponement of some of the drills within the program in 2020. However, we really hope that these are not going to affect the overall timeline which we aim to achieve, and for that reason we are in constant communication with all the companies operating within our EEZ to ensure that we can actually go on with the plans that have been that have been put in place for 2021. So with that in mind, we have been working with the companies to develop practical plans in terms of how these drills can take place, given the restrictions that we are facing in relation to the pandemic and the possible scenarios of how it's going to pan out in the next few months. Of course, as was mentioned previously, we also have the important development of Nobel's buyout by Chevron, where we await to find out whether this will be finalised and approved by the shareholders, which it will be on the 2nd of October as things stand. So we should have some developments very in the next few days, which hopefully will also be positive in terms of the continuation of our programs. So I'll stop there in terms of the introduction and look forward to a very constructive discussion with follow.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. So let me turn now to Yaniv Friedman, Deputy CEO of Delek Drilling LP, Avner Oil. And just a slight change in the order of speakers, because I know, Yaniv, you've got to rush off to an important meeting. So it's great to have you, and looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Hey, Joan. Hello, everyone. I must admit I'd rather be in New York right now. It's my favorite time of the year in New York, but unfortunately this year it's not working out. I've actually spoke, I think it was exactly 2 years ago, in a similar conference in New York. I believe it was titled Invest in Cyprus back then. And it was a day after we have announced and signed the deal relating to the acquisition of the EMG pipeline, which is a pipeline that is taking gas from Israel to Egypt. And I believe at that time it was there was a lot of skepticism around our ability to take gas from Israel to Egypt. And today, 9 months after we've started exporting gas from Israel to Egypt, I think it's a really good time to kind of look back and see what we've achieved. As some of you may know, Delek's been really, I guess, the pioneer in the region. We've had the pleasure of bringing in Noble Energy over 20 years ago as our partner in the first projects in Israel, and had the benefit of working together and through what I think is an amazing success story in the Eastern Mediterranean, with the main discoveries of Tamar, that was followed by Leviathan, and then Aphrodite in Cyprus. If we look, a year back, we had basically very minimal, if at all, exports from Israel to its neighbors, Jordan and Egypt. Looking 5 years back, we've barely had any gas sales domestically in Israel. And looking 10 years back, we've had no discoveries in this region. So looking through the past decade and seeing what we've achieved, first of all, discoveries of over 40 TCF of gas. And for those of you who are trying to understand what does 40 TCF of gas mean, I can tell you one thing: it's a lot of gas. So we have a lot of gas to sell and a lot of gas to monetize. And I believe these discoveries, mainly Tamar, Leviathan, and Aphrodite, have really transformed our region. First of all, they've transformed Israel from a country that was burning coal and liquid fuels. Today, Israel is burning mostly natural gas. It has some renewables and still has a little bit of coal, but the plan is by the government to within 3 years. We are selling more than 700 MCF per day, almost 7 BCM per annum, to Jordan and Egypt. I've spoken in many conferences in the past 10 years, and I've done many interviews to all sort of newspapers and television and radio, and the skepticism around our ability to go and sell gas from Israel to our neighboring Arab countries was really intense. And I can tell you, cross-border gas sales are a difficult thing to do, even when you're selling gas between the Netherlands and Germany. Much more when you're doing this in the Middle East between Israel and Egypt, for example. So I believe this is an enormous achievement. And looking today at, in the past 9 months, and what we thought would be a proof of concept. I believe we've been able to prove this concept and demonstrate that regional cooperation, and I fully respect the Gas Forum, and we are participants as a private company in the private sector within the Gas Forum. We truly believe in regional cooperation, and I think what we're able to do is actually demonstrate that this can be done on the ground, and massive, obviously, investments that are associated and as part of that ability. But again, looking back, I think this has been a remarkable year with all the difficulties of COVID-19, etc., to get these achievements. So if I'll, this is kind of talking about challenges. We've always believed in regional cooperation, and as the minister mentioned, we're welcoming Chevron as the operator in our assets, overtaking Noble Energy, that's been our partner for 20 years, and we believe that this is a great moment and a great opportunity for all of us, and taking us basically and the ability to take our projects and assets into the next level. We see a great opportunity in the region and in the cooperation between the countries, be it Cyprus, Egypt, and Israel. It's no secret that we're looking at monetizing gas from Aphrodite and from Leviathan and taking this to Egypt for liquefaction. So we hope that 2021 will allow us to move forward with those plans that have been, as the minister also mentioned, a bit slowed down by recent events. But we're great believers that where there are real commercial and economic needs, right, they also defy sometimes politics and other things that come on the way. And I think that we are living proof of that. And we truly believe that we're able to kind of tie all the loose ends and really bring prosperity and stability to the people of the countries in the region. Obviously, we are here to make profit, and this is our goal. And I think our message to governments in the region has always been that we need the regulatory and fiscal atmosphere to be able to make the enormous investments that we need to make. And just looking at what we've been investing in the past 5-6 years, we're looking at close to $8 billion CapEx program in this region. And especially in these days where things are much more difficult and gas prices are lower than what they've been historically, we need the governments in the region to recognize the fact that we are partners in this, and that we need to work hand in hand to find the path to be able to execute these projects. So I'll stay as long as I can, and if there are any questions for me, I'll be happy to take them. But thank you very much for inviting me, and I hope that next year we'll be meeting physically and hopefully in New York City.
Thanks very much, Mr. Friedman. Yeah, it's great to hear the business perspective, and particularly from someone who can take the long view as well. I know that many of the people in following these discussions today have, including myself, I've attended so many government roundtables in Athens, where we've had the participation of Cyprus and Greece and all the energy companies over the years. And I know some people were very skeptical whether this would ever come to fruition, but it has done, and we have seen this, huge acceleration of change. So, yeah, the skeptics have been proved wrong to some degree. So, yes, it'd be great if you can stay on and join the discussion. So let me ask our final speaker, Yanis Maniatis, former Minister for the Environment, Energy and Climate Change, Greece. I'm going to hand over to you now, and looking forward to hearing your perspective.
Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this very interesting panel. We are discussing about energy security and geopolitical development. In any case, any discussion on how geopolitics and energy security are connected must use the East Mediterranean as an example. A region with many political obstacles, but with so much potential to achieve important benefits for its citizens. I'm referring to the region's fantastic natural gas resources. It must be our number one challenge to ensure that these lead to reconciliation and not, as recent geopolitical developments have shown, to threats for peace and security. The most recent crisis is the aggressiveness and revisionism of Turkey by military means against sovereign rights at sea by violating the exclusive economic zone of Cyprus and Greece. Preceding that, Turkey and Libya concluded a so-called bilateral memorandum delimiting, although a simple look on the map reassures that this memorandum is out of place and groundless. The ongoing Turkish action culminated through its boat at the exclusive economic zone, surrounded by the totality of the Turkish fleet of the Med, bringing about a potential confrontation with the Greek fleet on the spot. Despite the unprecedented aggressive challenges Athens has faced, there will be a resumption of the exploratory talks between the two sides. The only subject of the talks is to prepare the ground for negotiations aiming at the delimitation of the exclusive economic zone in order to submit to the judgment of the International Court of Justice. In fact, Greece's international energy strategy to become an energy hub is an effort to promote the country's geostrategic position by unlocking the potential of energy sources for regional stability and strengthen Europe and the regional energy security through the diversification of sources and routes. These developments have not been inevitable. I know because I had the great honor over the previous critical years to be associated with all the policy decisions that have brought us here. I am referring to some co-financed by the European Union projects that we have designed, promoted, and finally managed to include since 2013 in the list of projects of common interest. I'm discussing about one as a pipeline to open the Southern Gas Corridor. Two, we pushed forward with interconnector Greece-Bulgaria IGB from a project of bilateral significance to a project of regional importance, developing the so-called vertical corridor from Greece to Bulgaria to the Central and Eastern Europe countries. Three, we encouraged to develop a new LNG capacity in the northeast of Greece, namely the well-known FSRU Alexandroupolis, in order to export gas through the new corridor from south to north. And four, we secured financing from European Union to upgrade the Revithoussa LNG terminal, expanding storage capacity by 70% and delivery capacity 40%, allowing the facility to supply more than 7 billion cubic meters per annum. All above, developed to their fullest potential, together with EastMed pipeline, can cover 8 to 10% of Europe's needs in natural gas and thus reducing the dependency on the Russian gas. I repeat the number, 8 to 10% of the total European consumption. The potential to use energy policies to promote regional cooperation is clear in the East Mediterranean. We have already discussed about the agreements between Israel and Egypt, Israel and Jordan, improving of supply and relations at the same time. The East Mediterranean Pipeline, EastMed, has encouraged important alliances offering multiple benefits for European energy security. Above all, it helped to unlock the potential of the Southern Gas Corridor by broadening its scope to include gas from Levantine by diversifying gas source routes and by contributing to the European Union's long-term objective in reducing dependency on Russia. It creates cooperation of democratic countries like Cyprus, Greece, and Israel as an anchor of stability in the East Mediterranean. The pre-feasibility studies demonstrated that this project is technically feasible, economically viable, and commercially competitive. Already the project has stimulated friendships and cooperation in the East Med region, inspiring a series of trilateral agreements and an intergovernmental agreement between Greece, Cyprus, and Israel, cooperation with Italy, and of course, their own 3+1 initiative with the United States. The East Med Gas Forum has recently transformed, it is a good news, into an international organization that respects the rights of members in accordance with the principles of international supported by the European Union, United States, and France. In parallel, closing with these remarks, I also want to see more on new forms of energy apart from renewables. I am thinking of low-carbon hydrogen, which the European Union sees as a major factor to achieve the Green Deal. Indeed, the aim is to achieve by 2025 the production and transportation of 1 million tons of hydrogen across the European Union. Hydrogen can be distributed partly by repurposing or reusing parts of the existing natural gas structure. We have the means to do this, and we should do this. And finally, let me notice that it is vital that this keeps up with Europe's major initiatives like the Southern Gas Corridor policy, renewables and energy savings, and in the near future with green hydrogen. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maniatis. So thank you all of you. So we have some time for discussion, which is great. I have a question which is for all of you, and that is about Turkey. So we've heard a lot today about new forums, new energy forums, new memorandums of understanding and alliances and so on. Is there a space for Turkey? I completely take on board what the Foreign Minister of Greece has said. In fact, he said it at our government roundtable in Athens a few weeks ago, said that as long as there's gunboat diplomacy, there isn't a possibility of dialogue or talks or anything else. So putting that aside, and it's very positive that there are moves now towards dialogue, is there a space for Turkey in any of these fora that have been established in the region in the recent period? So maybe I can start with Mr. Panon to take your view on that.
Yeah. Well, let me be clear. Within the construct of the Eastern Med Gas Forum, the United States is going through the process to seek observer status. That only the countries that are exist in the Eastern Mediterranean can be member states to that forum, and I would certainly defer to the minister to speak to that, as Cyprus has a leading role in the forum. And the confederation of how that could go. The United States view is consistent. Turkey is an important country for a lot of reasons. We want to make sure that Turkey sees the opportunity set that it has through a cooperative model Turkey needs energy. A lot of U.S. LNG finds its way to Turkey. I think it's in everyone's interest for there to be cooperation. They're a huge market. It makes all the sense in the world that they approach in a more collaborative way, cease provocative actions, and come to the table and enjoy the benefits that the rest of the region is enjoying. I think it's certainly not too late. And the United States, through a variety of other channels, is making that encouragement directly and through public interventions. And as I also recognize, Greece has, in the context of the recent joint statement between the United States and Greece with respect to the high-level dialogue that Secretary Pompeo participated in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fanon. Minister Polides.
Sorry, just unmuted my microphone. Firstly, let me start by thanking Mr. Fanon, not just for the comments that he just made, but also for the US government's very, very, very useful support in exactly communicating to Turkey and to the international community the importance of collaboration within a peaceful environment where we will respect international law and each other's sovereign rights. I think that is extremely important in paving the way towards a more peaceful framework where we can actually start a meaningful conversation. As Mr. Fanon pointed out, the EMGF is a very, very good example of collaboration within the region, which is basically done in good faith and with an open and positive agenda by all parties concerned. It is no accident that the EMGF statute includes provisions for new members, both with observer status, such as the status that the US has expressed interest in, which of course is extremely important and supportive to the effort. The EU has also shown similar interest, and that is also particularly important and meaningful. The EMGF does not exclude anybody as long as the countries that come in, as I said, respect international law and base conversations on the values shared by the different members. So it would be great to have Turkey both join multi-lateral efforts, but also bilateral efforts. And in that regard, we do hope that the recent events and ongoing sort of provocation within REZ will stop, and that following that we can take forward a discussion not just in terms of the challenges and the different matters that arise with regards to the exploitation of gas reserves, but also on a wider and more sort of holistic level in order to find a solution to the Cyprus problem, which of course is the main priority of the Republic of Cyprus.
Thank you very much. Mr. Friedman, I don't know if you have a view on this, or more broadly, actually, just to ask you the question about, are you optimistic about an expansion even of regional cooperation? Lots of unexpected things have happened this year, from the Abraham Accords to the institutionalization and of the as an intergovernmental organization of the EastMed Gas Forum. Are you confident that these forums will encourage others who are not yet members or observers to join? What's your take on this?
Yeah. So I really have 2 minutes, and then I have to leave. So first of all, I'm glad I'm not, I need to take or give political comments. That's not my role. I do think that there is a role for, for all the countries in the region to participate in this. And as I've said earlier, I'm a great believer that where there's a real economic commercial need, right? At the end, politics somehow finds a way, or at least that's, maybe I'm naive, but at least that's how I see things. I think that even a very recent example is there is a block and a potential gas discovery that lies between Israel and Lebanon. As you all know, don't have any diplomatic relationships and consider each other an enemy. And even through U.S. mediation, Israel and Lebanon are going to talk about how to try and monetize and unitize these potential reserves. So there's hope for everyone. And we as a company always said, and it's no secret that we've been in discussion with Turkey as well in the past. And we've always said that our view is, we follow international law, right? So we're not getting into the politics of the issues, and if we see an opportunity, we try and get it, but always follow international laws, international rules, and transparency and discussions with the relevant government. And if I'm optimistic, I'm in the business of being optimistic. You can't be in this business without being optimistic. Think about anyone who's taking $100 million and drilling a hole in the sea. If you're not optimistic, this is the wrong business for you. So yes, I'm optimistic, and I truly believe that we have a great opportunity in front of us, and bringing more countries, more people into this. And again, looking at our very small example of what we've been able to achieve with Egypt and Jordan, which again people both in Israel and in other countries thought was even unimaginable just a couple of years ago, then yes, I'm optimistic. Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, and it's been great having you. Thanks for your participation, and see you next time in person, I hope, in New York.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Mr. Maniatis, did you want to comment on that question about Turkey? Is there space for Turkey?
I have 3 brief remarks. First one, Greece has ever considered Turkey as a potential regional partner. We have supported the European candidacy and course of Turkey. We have also 4 rounds of bilateral high-level cooperation council, which brought the ministerial cabinets and of the 2 countries much closer. This is my first point. My second point is that all the bilateral or trilateral or multilateral agreements or memoranda that we have signed or participated have a keyword in their articles. The main keyword is that these agreements or memoranda are inclusive and not exclusive, which means that each country that respects the international law of the sea, the United Nations Conference on Law of the Sea, as well as the judgment of the International Court of Justice, of course, can be accepted in all these memoranda or agreements. But this is a basic prerequisite to that we all agree that the international law of the sea is the final referee, let's say, of what each country says. And my third remark is that, as I have already mentioned, there is only one issue to discuss during the exploratory talks between Greece and Turkey. And this is the delimitation of the exclusive economic zone, the continental shelf, and full stop. Any other issue is out of discussion and, of course, out of negotiation.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. We've got a little bit of time, so I've got a few more questions that have come in. So a question from Mr. Fanon about energy diversification. Why is energy diversification in Europe so important for the US? And is it really realistic to think that Europe can become so much less reliant on Russia? And what about Nord Stream, the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline? It would be good to hear just something about the US position on that, and whether the US is likely to go through with its threats to sanction European companies that are involved in that project.
Yeah, thanks. So with respect to diversification, and that speaks to the Nord Stream 2 question as well, the United States' position on calling for a more energy secure, more resilient Europe is long-standing. This has been something that that then President Ronald Reagan was speaking about, and of course we've entered a new era now that there's there's a greater degree of optionality away from Russian energy. We talk a lot about gas, and appropriately so, but I would also recognize Russian nuclear energy as well. Whether it's a pipeline or a nuclear plant, this is a 50-year-long relationship that Russia seeks to bind itself to countries. And when anyone, there's a psychology of a state when they're dependent on someone else. It calls to question how they'll respond to that state because of the sense of dependency. When there is a lack of optionality to turn away from that, then it changes it affects their foreign policy and their posture in international fora. And I think only till recently do we really have the scale of optionality that exists today. I think we're talking about U.S. LNG in certain instances, and we're certainly supportive of U.S. gas. In fact, about half of all Greece's gas that they're importing from LNG is from the United States now. But this is still new. The United States just started exporting LNG in 2016, and in about 3 years later, we went from the 15th biggest exporter of gas to the 3rd. So the rapidity of what's happening, of this transformation, I think the world is still coming to terms with. Secondly, with respect to nuclear power, we're seeing, just in the case of US LNG, we're also seeing new nuclear energy in the commerciality of small modular reactor design, which is absolutely transformative to the point of and when the minister spoke to the net zero calls and some of these policies in Europe. Globally, firstly, when you have renewables built out at scale, gas is the foundation for that. So there's a new means to do that from the United States, or in the still nascent but very dynamic and developing Eastern Med gas and the interconnectivity that we've talked about. Secondly, zero carbon energy, of which a small modular reactor base load energy could serve, but also in terms of the expansion of renewable energy systems and looking at it in a holistic way and combining these. I also have to say, though, that as we look to do that, it opens up a new threat, a new vulnerability, and that would be in the context of cyber. Because as we increase the interoperability of energy systems, it requires a new approach in terms of grid management and software and inverters, and we calls to question where these are coming from. And so I would just recognize that, given the U.S. position with respect to some of the Chinese 5G technology. So I just thought that's worth noting because it fits into this bigger Green Deal call, and to avoid a new vulnerability. With respect to Nord Stream 2, in July, the Secretary Pompeo updated our guidance pursuant to the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. We have acted pursuant to that updated guidance. CATSA is a discretionary statute which provides considerable latitude in terms of targets. Firstly, I think it's critically important to underscore, we do not want, it is not in our interest, we do not want to sanction any company, but we have also had to respond to the continued escalation of the Kremlin through the course of this time. We've been calling for and cautioning against Nord Stream 2 for some time, but unfortunately the Kremlin continues to escalate their actions, which required a sufficient countermeasure to that. We think that our sanctions is having considerable effect. We know that for certain. Lastly, I would point out, that's no secret, the United States is going through an election. This area with respect to Russian energy dependency and the U.S. Concern about it is something that unifies both Republicans and Democrats, and there's been successive legislation to address this issue. And so we're acting pursuant to the equal independent branch of government, which is the Congress. And I thought that's also worth mentioning. I think this is an evergreen issue regardless of political affiliation.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that very full answer. Really appreciate it. Minister Palides, you mentioned in your introductory remarks about delays that have been experienced with some of the projects because of the whole situation with COVID and difficulties in regulations and so on. I just wondered if you could say a bit more about that, and also about whether this uptick in tensions in the region, in the Eastern Med over the summer, whether that's likely to have an impact as well in terms of delays, whether it's do you think that it's likely to have a negative impact on any investors, potential investors in this field? So it'd just be good to get your view on that, or do you think that pretty much everything's now moving in the right direction and there's not really much to worry about?
I'll start with the second part of the question. We haven't experienced any delays or any. We haven't had any discussions with any of the companies relating to Turkey and its actions and the extent to which that could be a deterring factor. So the discussions have focused clearly on the impact of COVID in terms of the detrimental effect it's had on the market. That is something that was mentioned earlier as well. In terms of the licensees sort of outlook, in that yes, market conditions are fairly bad, I'm afraid, at the moment, and that is certainly a concern and an issue that has been seen to have affected some companies' decisions worldwide. So we've seen that a lot of assets have been spun off or sold by various companies, and we are very fortunate that in Cyprus that has not been the case. All the companies that are in REZ remain in REZ, and although there have been some there has been some postponement in terms of some of the drills that we had planned in 2020. As you said, yes, the plan is that the ones that have been slotted in for 2021 will actually take place. So just to make more specific mention of the different licensees, with Eni and Total, we've had some very sort of positive discussions in terms of the practicalities of how these next drillings will take place. So we're looking forward to taking the discussion forward and actually making plans for the sort of planned drillings in 2021. In regards to Exxon and Qatar Petroleum, again, we have plans for September 2021, which at the moment aren't moving well, and so we hope that also will continue to go as planned, and no further delays will come up. Now, with regards to Noble, Delek, and Shell, as all speakers I think mentioned earlier, the developments with Chevron are extremely important. We do have a slight transitional period that we have to cross now in order to sort of move on to the next stage. So far, we've had no disruption because Noble has continued to carry out the program very diligently throughout this period. So we have been in constant communication with them over the last couple of months. We need to see how, in practical terms, Chevron might change the status quo in terms of the team that is following the project, the logistics, basically. So we hope that those. I mean, we're certainly on board to ensure that our government and ministry will provide all the support so that we can minimize any delays that may actually arise from that transition, and hopefully we will be able to do that without any problems.
Thank you. Mr. Maniatis, any brief comment on anything you've heard so far?
Well, I think that following the discussion, I think that the basic result and one of the basic experiences after or during the pandemic COVID-19 in Europe is that our continent is fully dependent in many things. Europe is dependent on China for masks, on Russia for natural gas, on other countries for other basic products or services. So, from a geostrategic point of view, Europe should not anymore be so much dependent by third countries in all these basic products or services. Let me just say that even at the issue of storage, electricity storage in batteries, the European industry is dependent on third countries in basic raw materials, even in rare materials. So the basic conclusion is not anymore so much dependence. Let me just give you two numbers about the dependency of Europe on natural gas. The 27 member states consume each year about 450 billion cubic meters, 450 BCM per annum. The European production is 109 billion cubic meters, which means that Europe imports by third countries more than about 350 billion cubic meters. 40% of these imports come from Russia, about 20% from Norway, and about 10% by Algeria. So we must decide as European Union, as countries, as European economies, can we afford our economies to be dependent on basic services or products by third countries, or we should improve, increase our production in order not to be so much dependent in these issues? My answer, and I think that this is also the answer of the European Commission and the European Bill, is that we should, even or more than in other issues, at the energy sector, be less dependent on imports of natural gas. Or we should have much more diversified sources and routes. And this is, for example, why EastMed pipeline has its great geopolitical importance. It brings natural gas from a new source, it follows a new route, and so it means that all these things give to the member states the possibility to be less dependent on natural gas by the traditional producer, who is Russia.
Thank you very much. So that leads into, I'm going to give the final word actually to Mr. Fan, and that set up my final question to you, really. I mean, you've emphasized this, and others have too, that there's a large degree of bipartisanship on this question, energy issues, on 5G, on China in the US. By contrast, we see the 27 EU member states with actually quite divergent views on some of these questions. So are we heading actually for a world in which, a more bifurcated world in which EU member states will actually have to choose between one side or the other? And I guess in this instance, we're talking about choosing between China and the US on the question of 5G, on cybersecurity, and all these issues that you and others have raised. Is that where we're heading, do you think?
Well, I don't necessarily think that would be the result. Certainly not hope so, and that's not what the United States position would be. What we're calling for, though, is for there to be an awareness that of the very real threat that aligning your system to the Chinese Communist Party, controlled by the party, none of their businesses will actually function as transparent businesses. They're obligated, if asked by the party, to divulge all kinds of information. So there's a collection apparatus that's occurring. What I think, and the gentleman spoke to the issue of supply chains, and we've seen China's kind of mask diplomacy issues play out. I think that there was a couple of trends globally that existed prior to COVID. And we've seen in the post-COVID era, COVID served as an accelerant to some of those trends. And one of those trends was the concern of free societies, concern about the way the Chinese Communist Party acts and the way they behave, and that the way in which they approach business, not for business, but for other geopolitical objectives. China defines at the state level strategic industries, and then they incredibly put the entire weight of the state and state financing behind those industries to control them. One of those, was turning back to energy, is what China has sought to do, which is to decouple its way out of its reliance, effectively, on the U.S. Naval Protectorate in terms of oil coming through the Middle East. That also fuels into China's energy policies and their push for clean forms of energy and the control of supply chains for those clean forms of energy. That should be concerning to all of us. one of the just think of they put some of these battery technologies and some of these clean energies as strategic industries, as well as artificial intelligence. And just think of it's a bit dystopian, but it's not far from the future. To be sitting driving around in an autonomous vehicle, 5G, which is controlled by Beijing. It kind of, we can go to dark places on what that future could look like, but it's right around the corner. And so the call of the United States, and I think the rest of the world is also alert to it, is if we're basing our societies according to shared values, transparency, the things that certainly exist, have predated for many, many years in the transatlantic relationship. If that's foundational, which I still, in the United States, still believes it is, then we should look at all things through that lens appropriately, and that should be the barometer through which we engage with other states.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and I greatly appreciate the fact that you've all stayed on. It's very late for you, all of you in Greece and Cyprus, and we needed to do that so that our friends in the US could follow the discussions today and obviously elsewhere in Europe. So we do greatly appreciate the fact that you've stayed on at this late hour, and thank you very much for your contributions. And as several speakers have said, we hope to meet again in person next year in New York and hold this summit. Once again, I hope that you'll all be able to join us there. So thanks again, and I'm signing off now. Thanks from The Economist to all our speakers, all the participants, and all our sponsors for this event. Have a good evening. Thank you, wherever you are, and good night.
The wealthiest, the most successful people are generally international.
The world is becoming an ever volatile, ever changing place, changing much faster than it did before. There's a class of person out there now who's actually rapidly adapting to the changing environments.
The world is moving to global citizens.
Henley & Partners is a unique firm that is addressing the needs of this global citizen.
Like so many times in life, you don't get aware of the need until you really ended up in a situation, and then it's too late.
But it's quite useful to have just options.
Ultimately, quality of life, education, mobility, security, and tax. In this international and global world that we're in, these are the tools you want.
Truly the ultimate symbol of freedom.
Yes, being free.
It's the ability to live where you want, travel where you want, raise your kids where you want, and not subject your family to the fate of where you happen to be born. You actually get to choose.
I find that Henley & Partners are a professional company, but they're also very approachable.
Very open communication. It's like you know somebody for 30 years.
Always starts with an initial meeting where we really establish whether we are the right people to deal with and whether the client is right for us.
Well, from the point of view of the clients, and I've heard this from so many of their clients, the word family just comes up over and over again. It doesn't feel so much like going and talking to a professional services firm. It feels like a family.
And what we found is when we turn to Henley & Partners is we get the answers right away, and it's straightforward, and the timelines are condensed dramatically, and that gives us very much a sense of comfort that we're in good hands and we're with people who know what they're doing. It's a fantastic kind of all-encompassing service that you get when you come to Henley & Partners.
They know what they're doing. They're professional, efficient, courteous.
They are providing a true service to these global high net worth individuals that are concerned about taxes, concerned about their freedom, concerned about the safety of their family.
And that's what Henley & Partners offers our clients, and that's what Henley & Partners helps create and construct for governments.
The fact that they have so much experience actually working with governments to set up these investor schemes means, A, that they understand them back to front, because they've designed many of them themselves. I mean, they're there working with the governments to create them.
Henley & Partners is really the firm that created this industry, pioneering many of these programs.
I'm not aware of any other company that has the knowledge of both sides of the equation so deeply, so intimately, that they can really claim to be experts on both sides.
That's what Henley & Partners does, and we do it very well.
For us, location is kind of the key feature for any new business that we develop. And if you look at Cyprus, Cyprus is ideally and strategically located in the East Mediterranean.
It really is at the center of where you want to be.
When Melco Resorts decided to expand beyond our Asian roots, we spent the better part of 2 years going around the globe looking for expansion opportunities. Ultimately, we decided on Cyprus for 3 reasons. The first of which is that Cyprus represents a unique geography. Secondly, the stability of the local government here was something that was very strong and very positive for our investment outlook. But third and most importantly was in fact the pro-business stance that the government really takes.
Investment decisions in any market have to rest on 4 main pillars: sound macroeconomic fundamentals, competent government, an efficient and equitable legal and judicial system, and a predictable fiscal environment. And Cyprus scores very highly on all 4. We are seeing an increase in the registration of managed specialty funds, which shows that there is liquidity ready to be invested in advanced financial products. What we want is to be an active contributor to the development and growth of Cyprus. We will seize every opportunity that arises.
If we look at what we have done so far, we have roughly invested about 300 million euros here in the facility that the interview is taking place. Looking forward, we are very keen to further invest in this infrastructure. Firstly, by looking forward to participate in the LNG markets that will be opening up here in Cyprus in the next few years. And we see that as a great future prospect for Cyprus and also for us and our infrastructure to further invest in this growing market.
The one big surprise we had was just how strong the local market was and the availability of local talent.
Cyprus definitely feels like a place where something is always happening. First of all, you have a great infrastructure here. Great hospitals, great schools, great roads, great airports to and from Europe and the rest of the world. Then, from a business perspective, you have a very reliable legal system that's fast, efficient, cost-effective, and that is supported by all of the excellent law firms that are here on the island, which are really market leaders in their respective fields. The Cypriots are incredibly proactive, incredibly dynamic, incredibly can-do people, and incredibly educated too. And everything that the Cypriot shipping maritime cluster needs is pretty much here. There is nothing better than to be running on the beach when the sun comes up. For me, it's fantastic.
If you're asking me what do I enjoy most in Cyprus, I would have a simple answer. It's the people. The people, the people, and the people. But also the hospitality, the friendliness, the warmth, and the beauty of this country.
This is an absolutely ideal place not only to work but also to live.
So from that standpoint, I think If Cyprus isn't on your radar already, it deserves to be. And if it's something that you looked at and decided it wasn't worth digging a little bit deeper, I encourage you to take a second look.
I have absolutely no hesitation whatsoever on a personal or professional level telling other would-be investors to hurry up and get over here to Cyprus.
It is crystal clear that Greece's highly skilled and sophisticated human capital is one of the country's key pillars for supporting future investments.
Greece's greatest advantage is its people. The country's excellent human capital and the specialized know-how, particularly in food research, has created a complete ecosystem of agricultural schools and research institutes staffed with trained food technologists who can help develop innovative solutions needed to meet the demands of today's marketplace.
Imerys benchmarked several locations before choosing Athens. The choice of Athens means for us the ability to access to a talented pool of employees with strong expertise and language skills.
The belief is that Greece is attractive for international companies because Greece means growth. There is still a lot to do in Greece. Greece means controlled risk. First, because the situation is much more healthy economically. And second, because there is the umbrella of the European community.
We believe Greece is definitely a destination to be considered by any international group, and being part of the European Union makes the country more secure and safe.
Greece's strategic location